Call the meeting to order. We have Bonnie Sears, me, Rebecca Hanson, Mike Ahern, Chris Buckley, Marianne Barnsley, and Brian Murphy. The agenda out. We have a couple minutes before us right now. I think for the October 3rd, since we just have 2 people that were here at that meeting, we will table those until we have Bill Bolton and Steve Whitman around as well. But I think we have enough, there's 4 of us, so we can, from the meeting on September 19th. So we can review those minutes. I have a couple edits that I can go right into. It looks like this is already an amended draft, but I have a couple other edits. Colby Lenentine is spelled in, well, it's Lenentine. I'm not totally sure of the spelling, but it's spelled the same way throughout as Lenentine.
Oh, yes, it should be L-E-N-E-N.
Yep.
What's the date on those minutes?
Oh, that's September 19th.
Oh, okay.
Those are the ones we couldn't approve, we didn't have.
Well, I just have draft on mine, you guys have amended draft,
Yep.
so.
Huh?
And then under, it's really interesting, number 5, let's see number 4, but under number 5, administrative matters, the first bullet point, says the chair stated that the master, meant to say zoning plan, is in Steve Whitman's hands. I wonder if we could just write down what my intent was and not what I said and then what it was interpreted that I said. So if we could, I think so. That Steve Whitman's working on the zoning, our next steps for looking at our zoning ordinance.
So would that be the chair stated that Steve Whitman was working on, or is working on the zoning?
With his students. Yeah, perfect. Any other comments?
I had one here on the first page where it says public hearing opened, and then you get A, and then the first bullet point. Mr. Day plans to build a freezer outside and needs a 26 by 36 foundation. And to do so, what he needs, the foundation I thought was 38 by 38 to put a 26 by 36 walk-in
Yes.
freezer on.
Okay, that makes sense. You're good with those details.
Sometimes. And I didn't find anything else.
Anyone else?
I make a motion to accept these as amended.
Approve them?
Approve them, yeah.
I will second that.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Thank you. All right, so minutes have been approved for September 19th. We will table the October 3rd ones until we have a perfect storm of members that were there. Next up, we have a site plan review of a proposal to enclose a portion of the existing porch in an existing commercial residential building at 178 Main Street on PID number 109-018-003 in the highway commercial zone. Looks like we have our representative from this project. What we'll do is, this is a relatively simple site plan review, so we'll give you an opportunity to present your application. The board will make a ruling on whether, we'll ask any questions about the completeness of the application. We'll make a ruling about whether the application is complete, and then we'll open it up for public hearing at that point. So if you want to come up to the podium and present your application, that would be great.
Well, I don't really have the application.
You can just,
Borrow mine, Jim.
I gave the, I didn't make copies, I'm sorry. I kind of just gave it to Brian. So basically, what I'd like to do is expand my office without adding to the footprint of the existing building. And one way of doing that is to enclose a portion of the porch, not the whole porch. So if you're facing the house from Main Street, it would be half, the right half of the porch. And that enclosed area of the porch will connect with the existing room that's in the house to make it larger, okay? That, and then another wall in that larger room will be added to now create a small room, which would be used for me to do, I'm a chiropractor, so I would be doing a lot of my exams and treatments in that room, and then the much larger room that involves the enclosed porch would be used for physical therapy. So my goal down the road is to offer physical therapy services because it's complementary to what I do. So that is the basics of what I'm trying to do with the office. I am going to try to keep the exterior look of the house the same, consistent with the rest of the design, because I know that it's an older property that has a lot of history in the area. I want to make sure that stays intact, because that's one of the reasons why I chose it for my office. It's a beautiful house, so. So it's not going to look really any different than the existing house, only that there's going to now be a wall that you'll see with a window that comes to the edge of the porch. If you can picture that.
I can, I've been there, as you know. Oh, my neck.
I think that's what I said in the application.
so this is just for the board to think about as we keep having these projects that are pretty simple site plan review. And so we need to make a ruling on the completeness of this application. Now is a good time to look through the, pretty much everything that we usually require of projects. We have waivers across the board. So this is a good time for us to ask any questions about those waivers and determine whether or not we still want to consider this application complete. So any comments or questions about the completeness of this project?
These are the letters on the back, right?
Yes, per request.
So I did have a question about that. From what I could tell, there was supposed to be 6 abutters listed.
That includes the applicant.
Okay. So there were what, 3 listed?
Um,
Am I reading it wrong?
1, 2, 3.
But they're duplicates. So author and author.
We probably just didn't get the
Okay.
other page. We're only lacking 2.
Gotcha.
Other questions or perhaps some sort of motion?
I would like to make a motion to accept this application as complete.
I'd second that.
All those in favor of accepting this application as complete?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Are there any other immediate questions from the board? No? I'm going to open it up for a public hearing. It is 6:40. Okay, there's no public?
Where's Frank?
No, usually there's somebody that I can look at out there.
Hot
It's
damn.
still 6:40, closing the public hearing. Do I usually hit the gavel when I do that? I can't,
Yes.
okay.
Your discretion, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
well, I mean,
Ring a bell if you wanted to.
I do have a cowbell at home.
That'd be great.
Yeah. Any other questions from the board about this? Any,
Motions?
Amy?
Could I please make a motion to approve this application as being complete?
Awesome.
A second.
All right, all those in favor of approving this application?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you. Nice and easy.
I told you it was simple, Jim.
Yes, it was.
But we're not done. Building permit will be next, at your
Yeah,
leisure.
I have that on my desk. We'll do that. Great, so you don't need me? Good?
You're welcome to stay. This could be a riveting meeting.
Always
Usually
is.
are.
Yeah, somebody might need a back adjustment or something.
You haven't answered my wife, because, dinner's getting cold, and the kids are ready for bed. But I'd love to say. Thank you.
Nice.
See you, Jim.
Right.
Oh, do you need this back, Brian?
Oh, yeah, just for my
This
notes.
is my copy.
Thanks, Jim. File yours when you get home, would you?
Okay, this brings us to administrative matters.
We received a notice of regional impact from Holderness concerning a cell tower at Burley Farm. I took excerpts of a Google map to show the board that not only can't we see it, but we won't get any service out of it. The board elected to thank Holderness for notifying us and that we had no comment. And I have the letter here if you want to read it.
The board, this board?
Yes,
last
the
time. Okay.
Plymouth
all right.
Planning Board.
And that's not a development of regional impact notification, it is the cell tower notification
Correct.
thing, so just, yeah.
Which, yes, it's got its own special, and for those, it has a 20-mile radius regardless of abutting.
Yep. Apparently, it's gonna really improve the, reception along 113.
Along what?
113,
Oh, good.
what I've heard. All right.
Okay, the next order, I guess this is my segment. The containment, I guess, what would you call it? Retention pond at Harbor Homes failed during construction. Started washing out. So they re-engineered it, got a amended AOT, plus they had to deal with the Dam Bureau because it was holding water back. I have all the, an as-built plan that they would like to have signed. Mike Vignali and I both walked it. Mike had no comments on that. And then when the AOT and the Dam Bureau reports come in, they'll be thrown into the file with the rest of it. But it was just kind of a quick, they ended up shifting it. If you were looking at the building and it's in the back, it was over on this side, and they moved it over to another corner of the property, basically. And just looking at it with two engineers and myself, it seemed to make a whole lot more sense to have put it there in the first place. But
No, essentially, this is basically reactively creating a non-conforming use, and by signing the plans, we're turning it into something that's official, that's not, I shouldn't have said non-conforming, but, I'm just confused about the
Okay.
process.
The process is because you approved X and we got Y,
Yep,
this is the as-built of Y
okay.
and the reason why.
Yeah,
So,
I guess that's kind of what I meant, that
Yeah,
it's basically,
and-
they had to do it this way, which is not pertaining to the plan, so we're getting the plans that show, now that shows what it
Correct.
is, and saying, okay, we get it.
oftentimes, the board will require an as-built at the end of the project.
Okay,
And this would fit right into that if we were going in that direction. But that was the only part of that project that had any engineering changes in it. And it's all done, the grass is growing, and everything looks good now. And they all agreed, Jeff, you know Jeff, the engineer, and Mike, of course, they had long talks about it. And Mike's concern was just that they get the paperwork, not that he had any questions engineering-wise about the pond. because he, like I said, he thought it was a better idea to locate it there anyway.
Okay.
So they don't have to come back to the board if there's a change? To get
If they're in process, you know, and I guess it's up to the chair. If you wanted them to reappear for something like this,
This
then
seems
we
to be
certainly would.
reacting to a problem in the original plans,
Correct,
essentially. If
correct.
they were all of a sudden, like, we're gonna build another wing on this midstream, that to me would be a different issue, but because what was planned failed,
Mm-hmm.
they had to do something, probably couldn't wait for it to go through our process, they had to
Right.
re-engineer it.
And oftentimes, when they have these amendments, it's still in process, so they'll come back and say, you know, this is what we're doing, changing. But mostly it's scientific stuff, you know, and we have to rely on the engineers to, you know, give us, you know, the good data. But again, these kind of procedural things, there's nothing in the rules that says they should have stopped and come here. It's that, you know, proceed along, get the other paperwork going. We know an AOT doesn't happen overnight. So they wanted to get that process and with the Dam Bureau going as soon as possible. There's a lot more scrutiny on the dam side of things since they had that failure in Alton. So they're more and more involved in things like that. But from everything that I've seen and in talking to those two, this is going to be the one. And it won't have any erosive qualities there. It's all lined at this point, too.
I think I guess thinking it's more sort of like the spirit of, in the intention behind the change they're making to the original plans, like this, like I said, is reactive. They need to figure it out, but yeah, if it's something that's significantly changing the intention of what they were originally building, or if their new retention pond or whatever is, you know, really close to a wetland or, you know, something like that. So if it's deviating significantly from the sort of the intent and
Yeah,
general
it's
structure.
basically shifted it maybe 100 feet to the south.
But we rely upon their good judgment to say we should continue on, or, you know, go from X to Y without.
Well, at the point of failure, the building was up.
Okay,
So, you know, if it wasn't that, this is the way I looked at it, that it wasn't as significant enough of a change to require them to stop and come and represent. It was just one detail of the big picture plan.
We're relying on Brian's good judgment for that.
And these
one.
are-
so they
the
came to
asphalt,
Brian
yes.
and said, we're changing X to Y.
That's what I'm assuming.
Yeah, in order
Okay.
to, well, I went out there and viewed the failure.
Okay.
And said, what are you going to do?
Right,
And at that point, they went back to the drawing board.
gotcha, all
wanna
right.
look
I
at
missed
this?
that.
I don't know if anyone it seemed like a couple of people were concerned, Marianne.
Actually, I was more concerned
Oh,
procedurally,
yeah,
that was my,
So as long as Mike Vignali signs off on it, I think you need a vote from the board to give you permission to then sign, or you don't?
No, I am not signing. The board has to sign it, so this is why I brought it forward this way. And they wanted this for their record, so. I don't know if you can actually see here. This is, you know, the grading plan. You can see where the retention basin is now. Is this the original? Because they ended up, most of it was collected here, and this is now higher, so it's being actually pushed back in this direction. All the water is entering from this direction here, and there's from the parking lots here, so it's coming in at the same spot, but instead of staying here, and roughly here is where the failure was, they've continued that pipe and loamed and seeded it and created the pond more up on this side. So that's basically it.
So you need a vote from us. And the vote would
Yeah,
hurt.
I think
Yeah.
the vote would be, never hurts.
Right. So we would want to have a motion that says we approve the final as-built plans for the Harbor Home development. So someone could just say, so moved.
So moved. That was easy.
Second.
Okay, so all those in favor of approving the as-built plans for the Harbor Home development signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And you'll need my signature on that.
Yes. And you made the motion, Bonnie?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And that was all I had. The rest was up with continuing stuff. It doesn't look like we have any visitors.
No, we have no, and I haven't heard from Steve, except right before I was on vacation 2 weeks ago, so I'm not
Right.
sure what the status of that. I'm assuming we'll see them at the beginning of November.
Yeah, a couple of them showed up at the conservation, well, Chris was there,
Okay.
conservation meeting, and gave a presentation on the trail, at least as it stands today. A few recommendations. They want a map. They also want to walk the much-wanted Riverside nature walk.
Okay.
The idea being that the Conservation Commission would like to see it connect to as far west as possible, so we could have a corridor, from Rumney, say, along the river.
Is this the river walk that would go like behind the hotel and liquor store? And
Yes.
Okay.
And would it come into the center of town?
It actually comes out the Gardens for Many, down there at Langdon Park.
Yeah, part of it, well, where the ski trails are at the high school, Langdon Park, all that.
Yeah. And that's an improved, because it's a right-of-way and easement area for Plymouth Village Water and Sewer, so they have to get their vehicles down there. So it's, there's a little bit of maintenance that's already being done, for that purpose, even though they're not down there much.
Has anybody here walked that from where it starts to Hatch Plaza?
Yes.
Not all the way.
Well, because I was interested and I wanted to, but I didn't know if I'd be able to walk the whole thing and then turn around and walk back. Or do I place a car up here at Hatch Plaza and make sure that...
Call me, I'll pick you up.
Okay, I'll bring my cell phone, call somebody.
You could do it. It's very, very doable.
Yeah, it's pretty flat.
I just would like to know, what everybody's talking about, so if I walk it, I guess I'll know a little more.
Are there settlements still along the,
I don't believe so. And from what I have heard, the bridge settlement is no longer there. That's what Bill said the other day.
okay.
So I don't know if they moved into Harbor Homes or, moved on.
Different
Because it's getting
bridge,
cold.
yeah.
Yeah. Fortunately.
Right, different bridge.
Okay, so I'll check in with Steve about the, about his students' involvement next time around. And if they give us any assignments for, I could read the minutes, I suppose, but for,
I think they had the assignment.
Right, I think so too.
all right. And I haven't really jumped much more into any of the master plan implementation zoning work. Does anyone else have anything to add about master plan zoning stuff? The one thing I was thinking, since we're here and we have a site plan, I guess we need to actually amend the site plan review, the documentation itself. But Brian, I guess I'm just wondering, it just seems like most of what we're coming across are minor site plan review. So I'm wondering if you had a vision for what would make things easier on your end.
Well, it all lands on me anyway. I was thinking, make life easier for you guys.
So,
I really haven't delved into it. I wanted to look at, read through the RSAs,
Okay.
and talk around and see what other communities do
Yeah.
for administrative level site plan.
okay,
I think it would just be a matter of putting parameters around it. If it meets
yep,
on every point, then, it fails the big picture and it would revert to an administrative review. And anything that you wanted to put on it as far as physical size. I mean, right now, and the reason that Jim was here is because he broke the 100 square foot rule.
yep,
And, at the end of the day, when he's finished, there will be absolutely no change to the landscape. So I think those things need to be considered.
right.
certainly new development, no matter how minor, would come to the board. But when it's not change of use, but expansion of use. So I think that if you guys want to think about, how much power you want to cede in that
Right.
regard, that would give me a good idea for
Right.
it.
And again, I just want to make sure that we're all thinking about not just who we're ceding power to, that we're not always going to have, it's not going to be, oh, we're just going to, Brian will take care of it. We need to just make sure it could be a brand new planner. It could be a lot of different people that we're, so we just need to make sure that we are covering our bases and not ceding it to an individual, but
Yeah.
to a position or even a potential
And
position.
I've written some amendments to the zoning, and, well, one in particular that follows this almost exactly was the adoption of the building code. And I kind of went out of my way to make sure that it didn't indicate that I was going to be that person. So it just follows, select board designee or
Yep.
planning board designee
Right.
for, a certain act.
Yep.
And that's all you're
Right.
giving up.
And not necessarily just in title, but in our concept, that I feel like we can lean on you a lot more than we might be able to lean on somebody who's
Yeah,
advising
that's
us
possible, yeah.
as a new, in a, I don't know if you're still going to be here in 15 years at this table.
God willing.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I hope you're still, yeah.
15 years, I may be sitting where you're sitting, Madam
Yeah.
Chair. I don't know.
Yeah. So we just don't, exactly. So we don't know who's going to be advising
Right.
the board and providing that administrative support.
Right.
So,
And chances are in things like that, typically it falls to the building official. But if there were very clear guidelines, and that's something that I've really tried to been hammering. Everything's a bit too loosey-goosey on certain things. But, so you define the parameters, and it's,
Yep.
even checklists, like the criteria for a variance.
Yep.
If you fail on any one point,
right.
you're done, you go to the big one. So, I think that would be a good winnowing process.
So some clear criteria. Okay. All
And it
right.
doesn't have to be aerial or,
Yep.
it's whatever the board might feel.
Do you need help in reviewing other town ordinances, or do you think that's something that,
Generally, I'll just click on their website and go
Okay.
through their regs and
Right.
see. And certainly, I mean, the searching now is, so easy. You put into administrative site plan
Yeah.
review or minor site plan review, New Hampshire.
Yep.
I'm sure you would get hundreds
Yep.
of responses on that. So
you don't
that's
have
where
to-
I'll
yeah.
start.
And I'd reach out to the Lakes Region Planning Commission
Yeah.
too, because
Yeah.
they're a good resource for that. I just want to make sure that you don't need an extra research. I'm just looking for volunteers. Anyone else. I can't give you much help, but.
Right.
All right.
No, it's part of the job.
Okay.
So.
Great.
I do appreciate help, but, something like this, it's basically just, computer searching and seeing, okay, throw a bunch of stuff in a pile and give it to the board, and, my job is done.
Yeah.
It's up to you,
All right, awesome. Any comments about site plan review? Any opinions from the board about minor site plan review? Any reports from additional boards? Anything from the Conservation Commission?
Is it okay to report on what McGinley was?
At this point, well, I'd already talked to the chair a little bit about it prior to the meeting. I was wondering myself how much information to let out. I don't want you guys to be seen as having made up your mind before the application arrives. But basically what's on the table with him now is conservation easements and relocating a wetland. So one requires the easements, and it's pretty complex. But you have better, you were there, I mean,
Yeah, I think because he's into phase, and I think the thing that would be of interest to us is phase 2 of the Riverside Landing project.
Yeah.
So, what, with 3 new buildings, or?
basically three buildings along the road between Dunkin' Donuts and the Bank of New Hampshire.
Yeah, so that, I mean, that'll eventually come before us. I think what's kind of interesting is, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding was he sort of exceeded this threshold of how much wetland he was taking, so he sort of had to mitigate that by setting aside 2 parcels of land. And the 2 parcels of land are pretty useless to him, but they're pretty awesome for the Conservation Commission. So if it all, and it will eventually work out, it sounded like, but yeah, it seemed like a win-win, so.
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff he's seeding, the one thing that he was unsure about, and I sent him some excerpts today from Fish and Game, was liability of landowners for recreational uses. And pretty much, if you let people cross your property, that's at their own risk. You're not responsible for criminal acts that occur to them. Any of that stuff. It's basically, with Fish and Game, it's all about access, and trails. So otherwise, the whole snowmobile system would fall apart, if they didn't allow that. But yeah, it turns out that, and there have been some cases recently about this, where they're trying to come after the landowner because so-and-so was unprepared, going out in the wilderness, and the state said, no, you're going to shut down recreation as an industry if you start doing this.
Yeah.
And the ski areas went through it back in the 90s. There were a lot of lawsuits about people getting hurt on the slopes. And so finally everybody looked at it and said, it's inherently dangerous. So unless there's negligence involved, then you're pretty much have no liability. And that satisfied a lot of people.
So it sounds like this conservation easement for wetlands, and I don't want to talk about it too much, but it sounds like it's through the DES's Aquatic Resource Mitigation Program where they can.
Yeah, and the Army Corps, I
Yeah.
think, is involved.
Yep. And so if you impact a certain amount of wetlands, there's a couple different tiers. The first thing is you basically do a land swap really locally to that site. Other would be townwide, and then you can also pay into the fund, and the funds are distributed by the larger watershed within the state, so.
And I think it turned out that the least expensive of those would be putting aside these in conservation
Yeah.
easement.
Usually the DES would like to see the mitigation happen as close to on-site as possible, and then if that isn't possible, then you start paying into funds to, then they try and keep the funds within the town and then within the watershed at large. Something you see a lot more in the southern part of the state where there's a lot more wetland impact, so. Yeah. But
But
yeah,
the-
they'll come before us next,
Probably at well, I don't know yet. I have to talk to Mike, but
Yeah.
next month,
All
for
right.
sure. One of the things that caught my eye was that it would pretty much protect Millbrook, that Millbrook, forever. Because that would be one of the parcels that would go under easement. And then it's a matter of determining who is going to manage the easement, whether it would be a third party or the Conservation Commission. And there's also money from the proposer to pay in for long-term maintenance. And he did give a figure that sounded, fairly high, but in the long run, it's not
pretty
that big.
standard for any conservation, land conservation group to take a stewardship fund fee for the property, so, yeah. All right. Interesting.
It's my report.
So the select board met Tuesday evening. We had 2 topics. One was there's going to be a group working out of the airport in Plymouth and would be flying drones. And it's quite an industry that could bring a number of jobs to Plymouth. So it's at the beginning stages. They're working very close with Colin MacGyver. And there's probably some benefits, I'm sure, to Plymouth. And it sounds like the pilots that are flying planes are doing really well with this drone group, and they are certified pilots. I guess a number of them are military. And as far as
These aren't drones. These are
Like,
drones.
Okay, that was my question. Yeah.
But they do have smaller ones, I'm sorry. to
No,
cut
that's
you
fine. So they're going to actually, I believe, build the drones potentially in Plymouth, repair, and so there's some industry to come with it potentially.
off. And they've reached out to the university too, in the robotics program, and they're excited about it.
Interesting.
There was also a first public hearing concerning the downtown parking and the new fine structure. So the Main Street Parking Committee has been meeting over the past 6 months or so, maybe 6 months, I guess. And they had 3 things they wanted to see. Number 1 was increase the fines for parking violations. Number 2 was to see more enforcement with the parking meter person, and then to make some off-site parking for Main Street. So we did locate some parking with Joe at the Highway Department by the sand shed. Scott has been making a much bigger presence downtown. And the third is to increase the fines, because they found that students were parking in the merchant parking area or for the customers and walking to class because the fines were so cheap. And they were not going to take a risk of getting a fine at the college parking areas because the fines were very steep. So we've proposed bringing the fine structure up to what Plymouth State would be charging. So there was very little. Bonnie was there, she spoke, and there was fewer questions. We're going to make one change that needed to be modified to update it, and I believe there's going to be a second hearing. Is that how you took?
Yes, they didn't take a vote on it. They just kind of left it hanging for
Yes.
people to digest, and I think it's at the next board meeting.
It seemed like we set a date, but could be. I can't remember that. So, that's select board.
Thank you. You have another committee?
No, I'm not, but I had a question whenever it's, I noticed, you remember back when they took the trees down? Like by the Panther Pub and I can't
Yep.
remember where else? And the guy from the light company came in and we talked about what nice trees they would put in place of it.
Yeah.
That just went away, didn't it?
No.
'Cause I don't see any
It's-
trees
it's-
there.
Well, it's not happening. Let's put it that way. It's happening, it's just not happening right now.
Yeah.
Oh, because I said, well, it looks all right, it's all paved over nice, but I said, I don't see any place where they're
Yeah.
gonna put a tree in.
And actually, we reached out to Scott, and we're going to replace some of the upper Main Street trees with those syringas as well.
And this is because the South Main Street is going to be torn up?
Part of it had to do with the late paving by the owner, and then life in general getting in the way. I was supposed to get a hold of Scott and get that moving, but highways, on one end of town.
Sorry, who's Scott?
The offer is ongoing. It's not like, use it or lose it.
The arborist from the...
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, he's the co-op arborist.
Gotcha. Okay.
So they will be coming back, plus the dead ones that are in front. I know that they've packed gravel in the one in front of the laundromat. And Steve just went ahead and paved it. They were going to relocate where that tree was anyway, closer to the curb cut. But with proposed work on South Main Street, that may also have an impact, though it shouldn't affect that side. Most of the infrastructure for water and sewer and the stormwater system are on the north or the westerly side. But they aren't sure where their feeder lines run. So they have to map that out and see if any actually ran through where the trees were supposed to be planted.
So it sounds like we'll be talking, just keep asking. So
Yeah.
we could- Yeah.
I just
No, we
wondered,
haven't
it's
forgotten
like,
about
yeah.
it, but
uh,
At least they got rid of the cutoff.
Well,
I noticed that too.
Stump.
The
so
place-
when
the
those were
placeholder.
cut down, people complained.
Really?
They cut that thing down?
Yep.
Why?
Because it was growing back and
Oh, the
Oh,
new
right,
shoots.
right, it was.
Oh, yeah, I guess it might have.
So, you can't please all the people anytime.
I was just waiting to see if a chainsaw artist was gonna come down
I
and make
wanted
something
that.
really cute there.
I told Steve to do it, Steve DeMarco.
Yeah.
Do you need a permit for that?
Panther.
Yeah,
Chainsaw sculpture in the streets of Plymouth?
I mean, no, but we could write one.
Yeah.
But I thought that'd be a great public draw.
Yeah.
Have somebody out there and, you could rope them off and just
Yeah.
be walking away at it. It'd be cute.
I'd watch it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have saxophone players and conga players downtown.
Why not chainsaw artists?
Everybody loves the sound of a chainsaw.
Oh, yeah.
Any other questions, comments,
None.
motions?
I'd make a motion to adjourn.
I will second that emotion.
All right. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
No one's opposed, right?
No.